Welcome to The Defender, Wisconsin's environmental podcast. I'm Amy Barrilleaux. The Defender is powered by Clean Wisconsin, your environmental voice since 1970. So what is the government's role? We probably all have different answers to that, but on some fundamental level, it boils down to protection. Our government is here to protect us, from the military to the National Weather Service, and I think we expect that protection. It doesn't matter who you are, what party you voted for, where you live. If you found out tomorrow that your land was polluted, your water poisoned, you would expect the government to act. You would be asking, where is the EPA? To hold the polluter accountable, to pay to clean things up. Every single person in this country has that expectation, except apparently the EPA. The Environmental Protection Agency is quickly getting out of the protection business, and nowhere is that more clear than its new plan to get rid of the Endangerment Finding, the landmark legal and science determination that climate change hurts people, and the EPA has the responsibility to do something about it. On this episode, a look at why the EPA is now insisting climate pollution won't hurt you, and what walking back the Endangerment Finding could mean for Wisconsin. That's right now on The Defender. Just days before historic flooding hit the Milwaukee area, and not so long after wildfire smoke from Canada had been choking our skies, I sat down with Clean Wisconsin attorney Katie Nekola to talk about the landmark climate ruling that the Trump administration is now working hard to erase. Katie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So I think this endangerment finding may be something that most people haven't heard of, but it's really, really important. So break down, I guess, the history of this legal finding, the endangerment finding, and how we kind of got up to this point.
Sure. In 1999, several states and environmental groups filed a petition urging the Clinton administration to limit greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide from motor vehicles. In 2003, the Bush administration denied that petition, and the case went to court. That resulted in Massachusetts challenging the denial in federal court, and the case eventually went to the Supreme Court, which ruled in a landmark 2007 decision that the EPA has the authority to regulate greenhouse gases. However, the court also said that in order to regulate greenhouse gases, the agency needed to demonstrate that those emissions threatened public health and welfare. That's what the endangerment finding is. So the EPA did its scientific work and concluded, based on the evidence, that greenhouse gases do in fact endanger public health and welfare. So the agency then outlined, all of the science and detailed how increasingly severe heat waves and storms and droughts and so forth do actually contribute to higher rates of death and disease.
So basically, it's the EPA had to establish under this court ruling that climate change hurts us.
Correct.
And I think I can see how maybe 10, 15 years ago that was kind of a big deal because climate change seemed so far away. But here we are sitting in Wisconsin when, we spent the whole first part of August not being able to go outside and enjoy it because we were all under these air quality alerts. Is that the kind of thing that we're talking about, this sort of public health impact of climate change?
Right, that's exactly the sort of thing we're talking about. And if there was enough evidence back in 2009 to prove that this was harming the public health and welfare, then imagine the evidence that they'll have now. And that's one of the things that the EPA has to do. It has to prove scientifically that it can repeal this rule. And that's what they are embarking on. That's what they want to do now.
So what's the rationale from the Trump administration and the current EPA to say, oh, no, there is no reason to regulate emissions, greenhouse gas emissions? What are they saying is wrong with that idea?
Well, what they're doing is entirely focusing on the costs of regulation as they see it, and they're ignoring the benefits of regulation. So, under that scenario, anytime you if you make that calculation, if you ignore the benefits and talk about the costs, there's only going to be costs, right? And so even the costs, they don't have a basis for. They're claiming that it's costing Americans more to, for example, buy cars, but because of emissions controls in cars and fuel economy standards and so forth. They have no data to back that up. I mean, the car industry has moved on. It's already retrofitted. It's making cleaner cars. And, to claim that this is costing us more money is just wrong.
And this may have started off about motor vehicles, cars and trucks, but it became about power plants too, right? So the EPA was able to look at coal and gas-fired power plants and say, hey, you need to take care of greenhouse gas emissions in some way. So we expect that if this endangerment finding does go away, then it's going to impact more than just cars.
That's absolutely correct. It will impact power plants, industry, which is also a source of greenhouse gas emissions, and of course, vehicles.
This looks to be part of a large effort from the Trump administration to walk back climate progress in this country. But I think young voters in their 20s, are incredibly concerned about climate change, and that crosses party lines. So Republicans and Democrats and independents, young people want clean energy. They want solutions to this climate crisis. So politically, it feels like maybe this doesn't make a lot of sense for the EPA to just say, we're not going to bother with any kind of standards for anything that has to do with fighting climate change. Do you think that that's how this is being interpreted when the EPA made this announcement that they are seeking this rule change, that it was met with kind of like, why are you doing this? This, we've come a long way since 1999 and this is an urgent crisis right now?
I think it's probably perceived by a lot of people as just part of the general effort of the Trump administration to dismantle protections of all kinds for the American people. I think that this administration has made it very clear that they're not interested in protecting people's health and welfare. And I think this is just part of it. I think there's a kind of erroneous perception that somehow they can appeal to people because by saying that, all these regulations cost more. I think the only people that really appeals to are certain businesses who want to cut corners.
When you were talking about the kind of history of this endangerment finding, I think this is true for a lot of environmental rules and regulations and efforts, that you get something on the books, and then the powers that be, the polluters, the industry folks, the very powerful groups start to try to pull it back. So I know it feels kind of unique that we're in this Trump administration where a lot of things are getting pulled back all at once, but is it fair to say that, anytime there's an effort to protect people and the environment, there's also a concurrent effort to stop those protections?
I think what's different now is that it's become so ideological. I think that a lot of businesses and industries now recognize that there are benefits to taking care of the planet and taking care of, for example, their sources of water, for clean air. I mean, if you don't want to locate an industry someplace that has really dirty air because you're not going to get workers to come and work there. I think that's what's different. I think a lot of industry has kind of moved on, from resistance and on the ground. I mean, GM, for example, is one of the has pledged to go emissions free by 2035 with its vehicles. Microsoft, a lot of these industries are embracing what we want them to do, and it's because it's good business. But I think now what's different is that the Trump administration and whoever is, whether it's Project 2025 or whoever is pulling these strings, is really doing all of this for ideological reasons, and it's sort of a culture war. That's my opinion.
I think we're in a place we're seeing a lot of strange things happening at the federal level. The EPA's mission is to protect public health, to protect people. And it seems like the federal government is kind of moving away from that, we should protect people role, not just through the EPA, but through, a whole host of changes throughout our federal agencies. When you look at what's happening at the federal level at the EPA, I think it's easy for people to kind of lose hope, to think, well, all these protections we fought for, they're all going away. So what's your reaction to that kind of moment of shock and overwhelming feeling that I think a lot of people have?
Well, I think all of us need to take a minute and just go ahead and acknowledge that things are hard right now, very hard. And I think we also need to look for other ways to fight back. I think we need to really stop and think, what can we do at the state and local level? I think there's a lot that we can do. I think we have leadership at those levels. I think we also need to get out there and resist. There's just no substitute for it. They need to hear loud and clear that this is not acceptable.
We were talking about the courts. So you're an attorney. The endangerment finding was a landmark Supreme Court decision. Now we have a different kind of Supreme Court. Do you feel, concerned that our legal system is not strong enough to keep these protections in place?
I'm always concerned about that, because you just never know. I have to hope that the current Supreme Court will take seriously its responsibility here to protect the citizens of this country from the sort of extreme rollbacks that we're seeing. I don't know whether that will happen, but I think that, again, we need to send a strong message to Washington, to anybody that'll listen, really, that we're just at a critical time. If we don't take this seriously now and do everything we can to curb climate change, we're just going to continue to have more flooding, more deaths, more wildfires, more smoke, more hurricanes, and like the crazy high temperatures that we're seeing all summer long here in Wisconsin.
I do want to stress that right now the endangerment finding is still on the books. The EPA still, for now, is responsible for protecting public health from climate change. What has to happen for that important responsibility to go away?
Okay, there's a whole rulemaking process that has to happen, which was launched here last week. And so the EPA launches this rulemaking. There's a comment period where the public can weigh in. They have only 45 days from the time it's published in the Federal Register to write a comment to EPA, and I urge everyone to do that. After which they go through a whole process of the rulemaking process, basically, and finalize the rule sometime next year, probably, at which time there will be a lot of lawsuits.
You say there are going to be a lot of lawsuits, so you expect like environmental groups like Clean Wisconsin to sue, things like that, or states, or how does that work?
Well, I think just like with other rules that the Trump administration has tried to roll back, like the power plant rules and the mercury rules and so forth, I think a lot of states will sue because a lot of states have a big interest in clean air. Well, they all do, actually, but and of course environmental groups definitely will sue.
Do you predict that the state of Wisconsin will sue, or that Clean Wisconsin might be involved in any of this kind of thing?
I think it might be likely. We certainly have been in the past. We've joined with other groups and national environmental groups to sue in the DC Circuit over these power plant rules and mercury rules and so forth. The state of Wisconsin has also stood up to the government about a lot of this, so I think it might be likely.
So I think, it's easy to kind of get in a dark place when you start seeing all these rollbacks. I mean, I had one episode not too long ago where I just kind of listed out a bunch of things that had been rolled out, and it was not a complete list. And so I think it can be overwhelming. But at the same time, if you look at how far we've come, I went through some historic photos of downtown Madison with a coal plant, of the Wisconsin River covered with some kind of foam that came from a paper mill, like totally really, really bad pollution moments. And here we are, we've come so far, despite this sort of pendulum of we get a regulation and then it gets clawed back, kind of back and forth. You've been working in the environmental space for a long time. You've fought very hard for a lot of protections that we have right now. What kind of perspective can you give people who are feeling kind of like, wow, is the environmental moment over?
I never say it's over because it can't be over. We can't let it be over. I think we've got to recognize the seriousness of the moment that we're in now, but I think that's just a sign that we have to work harder to protect the gains that we've already made. I'm encouraged because, for example, the coal industry is not coming back. It's not going to come back no matter what Trump does, because it's just too expensive and it's just seen its day. It's not going to come back. It's unfortunate that he's rolling back incentives for renewable energy, but again, the renewable industry is in its prime. It's doing great, and the tariffs are not helping. But I do think it's got momentum now that it didn't have before. So I'm encouraged by that. The mercury rule, for example, power plants in Wisconsin have already retrofitted so that they've got mercury controls in place. So, I think some of the gains that we have made cannot be rolled back because they've been adopted by industry already. And I think the fact that industry itself has recognized that it's necessary to embrace some of these environment-friendly and health-friendly policies and practices is really working in our favor. So I think that the Trump administration is kind of living in another century in their minds, and hopefully we can just move past them.
What do you expect? Let's say something happens and the endangerment finding goes away, or some of these protections that are in the middle of being rolled back go away. How do you see those impacts playing out in Wisconsin, or what are the, backstops we have to keep the harms from being as bad as they could be?
I think it depends on how the federal government regulations play out in a lot of these cases, because in many cases, Wisconsin can't have stricter regulations than the federal government. And so currently, for example, there needs to be motor vehicle testing, emissions testing in the southeastern counties because they've got air quality challenges over there, more than, for example, the rest of the state. That may go away, which would be unfortunate, which would increase the ozone problem in Milwaukee and the surrounding counties. And I think, it might have a snowball effect by just sort of reducing the amount that Wisconsin itself can do to keep its own air clean and water clean.
Yeah, that's a good thing to point out, because I think today, as we're recording this, there is an ozone alert happening in like 4 or 5 different counties in Wisconsin. So we think of Wisconsin and canoeing down the Wisconsin River and everything so pristine here, but that's not the case in a lot of counties. There's certainly pollution here.
Oh, definitely. I mean, there's groundwater pollution in a lot of the state from agricultural activities and, contaminated wells, drinking water. And yeah, the southeastern counties are really challenged with air quality. And, again, the Trump administration has rolled back the good neighbor rule, which helps to limit, or would help to limit, pollution coming from other states, air pollution. And so it's an assault on public health and welfare, definitely.
I think we've touched on this already, but what would you say to somebody who's listening who feels kind of like so overwhelmed by, it's not just an assault on environmental protections, but it's a rapid assault on environmental protections. It's very difficult to even keep up. What would you say to kind of help people build a movement, or to think about how to connect with other people in this moment that you have pointed out is so critical?
Well, I would say join Clean Wisconsin.
That's true.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I'm not just joking about that. It doesn't have to be Clean Wisconsin, but that's always a good one. But, be with people who are doing this kind of work and who are resisting, and, get out there. And if you don't want to get out there yourself, write letters, or just talk to people. Let's talk, make it a part of the everyday conversation. This stuff matters. And I think, and it's very understandable that we're all living our lives and we've got a lot of other things on our minds and things to worry about. And, if you think about the endangerment finding, you're not going to necessarily think that has anything to do with you, right? Um, and but there's always something. It doesn't have to be this. There's a whole groundswell of resistance to these rollbacks to all of our protections in terms of health and environment. And there's something. It all affects you, but maybe pick the thing that affects you the most and try it and just talk to people about it and see where you can kind of plug in and if there's something that you can do.
Clean Wisconsin General Counsel Katie Nekola, thank you so much for your insight and for explaining the endangerment finding so that we can all understand it. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening to The Defender. If you want to make your voice heard and send a comment to the EPA about its proposed rule to get rid of the endangerment finding, I've put a link to do that in the show notes, or you can log on to cleanwisconsin.org/action. I'm Amy Barrilleaux. Talk to you later.